Shakespearean, actually.
That's why
It does.
Now, you want us looking at you, John, or at
Yes.
the camera?
John.
Yeah.
Hey, John, can I ask you one? That's fine. Never mind. Okay.
Just great. All right, you're up.
Well, Steve, no surprise, I'm going to ask you to explain the scope and purpose of the project, particularly these concepts of conflict mapping and interconnectedness that, to you have great meaning, but to a general audience may not so much. So tell us about what the intention was and how you went about it.
Well, obviously the Horn of Africa has been fraught with a lot of conflict over recent years. That goes back 10, 20 years or more. And when I say conflict, I'm not just talking about sort of interstate conflict, but also tragedies around drought and starvation and refugee movements and et cetera, all of which are probably born originally from a conflict cause, where there is no proper governance, where there is no management of crisis, and so when a drought comes along and food disappears, government can't manage that, and people start to die. So it's an area that, for obvious reasons, security and human well-being, that we've paid attention to for a long time. Just in terms of our interaction with policymakers, which is one of the main purposes for the Woodrow Wilson Center. We're here to try to help inform and engage policymakers on issues of concern. We felt that a couple of things were not happening at the policy level, and that is that we were stovepiping too much. We were looking at the conflict of the day or the issue of the day. Most focused right now, for instance, on Somalia, where we are having a serious drought and starvation. Over 100,000 people have probably lost their lives. Or at Al-Shabaab, a terrorist group that we're all concerned about, and what that implies for the worldwide efforts against terrorism. And forgetting that there are root causes and interconnections between all of these conflicts in the Horn. And we think it's valuable for our policy makers to understand this analysis and to engage across the borders and across the spectrum of the causes. I think someone said, it might have been Paul Williams, the author, who said that all conflicts are local, sort of paraphrasing Tip O'Neill. And I think that's true. And if you're not beginning to look at conflict resolution at a localized level, if you're not conscious of that and how that feeds into larger and broader conflicts, you're going to miss a bet. And so we were driven by that. I mean, to try to engage policymakers. It began, though, with us discussing it with a group of knowledgeable people as to how we might go forward. And we realized that we needed a very good empirical look at exactly how interconnected the conflict was, and what it was and what it wasn't, and who was doing what to who. And so we engaged Paul Williams, who's a well-known academic in this area, to do that study for us. And it's from that we've drawn the policy recommendations and now are seeking to address interagency audiences and the Hill and others who have responsibility in these areas.
About those recommendations, you heard Paul provide a fine summary of those. I'm just wondering if there's anything in particular you'd like to highlight or add to that.
No, Paul's summary was very good. I would elaborate and not add that because this is an area where we have a lot of experience, and that is the impact of non-state actors, what we like to call track 2 diplomacy, on official mediation and negotiations efforts. One thing that governments need to realize, and don't always, is that they really need the help of the private sector, of civil society, however you want to term it, because they come in necessarily with the perception of people that they have an agenda that is reflecting their own national strategic objectives and are not necessarily neutral players. By partnering with or even supporting non-state actors in doing conflict resolution work. And that includes broad-based things, trust building, collaborative capacity building, cohesion building, just making protagonists or antagonists in a situation understand their interdependence, and that they need to be able to work together in a way in which they trust each other and honor their agreements with each other, or none of them will have their own interests met. That whether your agenda is governance or development or poverty reduction or the end of a conflict, that those things cannot happen unless you build those levels of trust. And that is better done by a non-governmental entity. And that is at the heart of one of our recommendations.
Final thought, your intimate in the trenches experiences with conflict resolution. I'm just wondering, when you look at the 6 cross-cutting themes identified and the nature of the problems identified in the report, what are your thoughts, general statement on both the hope of conflict resolution as a solution, and the limitations in addressing some of the types of problems that exist?
Well, I would start the answer a little bit differently, and it's kind of build on what I just said, because conflict resolution, in the way I'm talking about it, needs to be seen as one of the options in a peace-building effort. So that there is a role, obviously, for government. And while conflicts are still underway, when you're talking about peacemaking and actually bringing the conflicts to a close, then the kind of post-conflict reconciliation, trust-building exercises that I'm talking about probably can't take place. But we fight a constant battle on that, because there's a sense that conflict resolution is a very soft science, that it's really sort of a feel-good kind of exercise, and not doesn't really take us anywhere. And I know from long-standing experience that is not true. One of the problems, and this is emphasized in our report and the recommendations, is that you have to have patience. You have to give time for sustainability of those efforts, because nothing happens overnight. People don't transform the way they think about each other, the way they engage with each other, the way they work together immediately. The first thing that happens to them when they sit down with the other guy is that their own constituency begins to doubt their role and their dedication to the cause, and et cetera. So it's a long process, not just getting the trust of the other party, but being sure you can bring your constituency along with you. So you've got to nurture this over years. We've been working for 10, almost 12 years, 11 years now in Burundi, and only in the last few have we really begun to see great progress there. So that's the message, is that we're never saying conflict resolution trumps the sort of power politics of peacemaking, but it becomes a very logical and necessary partner when you need to reach out to populations and begin to try to sustain the peace that should be coming after.
Perfect. Thanks. Nope.